Senior Report 1. Seattle, Washington. Steve's Steakhouse. The night was seasonally warm, an easterly breeze blowing gently beneath the sparkling lights of uptown Seattle as a late model black Cadillac sedan pulled up next to the curb in front of Steve's Steakhouse and parked. Its driver, a large barrel-chested man in a dark suit, stepped out. Senior Report 1. Seattle, Washington. Steve's Steakhouse. The night was seasonally warm, an easterly breeze blowing gently beneath the sparkling lights of uptown Seattle as a late model black Cadillac sedan pulled up next to the curb in front of Steve's Steakhouse and parked. Its driver, a large barrel-chested man in a dark suit, stepped out into the balmy evening, quickly crossing around the rear of the caddy to open the door for 68-year-old Vincent Nicolte, a local businessman and reputed boss of the Seattle La Cosa Nostra. The two men were met at the door by a stately old head waiter and quietly shown their reserved table near a window. A glass of wine, perhaps, Mr. Nicolette. The maitre d' gave a slight nod of his graying head. Bring us a bottle of Rothschild. Yes, the old waiter bowed slightly before heading off. So, the big man said after the waiter had left, you think this muesli's going to come in with us or what? Vincent Nicolte considered his driver's words for several seconds before answering, I think you should show more respect for Benjamin, Victor. The Don admonished, he's not a man to be taken lightly, even if he's black. This thing he's doing has run with sheer mental aptitude and proves his character. You don't find those things in your average nigga, he said, turning to look out on the early evening traffic. Benjamin was a force to be reckoned, the old Don acknowledged quietly and thought. The man had far succeeded where he and his family had failed through sheer will and quickness in learning from the mistakes of others. The man ran the biggest numbers racket in the entire northern region, along with narcotics trade, money laundering, and fencing interests. Getting the man to come order his umbrella was going to be a sensitive undertaking, and most likely a little bit of pressure would have to be applied. Chicago wouldn't like his attempt at bringing the man over to his side, but what can the man say? He hadn't encroached on anyone's turf. The guy operated in Seattle as well as Chicago, so he was at most open to courtship from the Seattle faction as he was to Chicago, the likes of who had failed to bring the black into their fold, and now it was his turn. The Don mulled, shoving aside his thoughts as the wine was poured into the glass for him. Anything else, Mr. Nicolte? Give us a few minutes. The Don said, I'm expecting company any moment. Very good, sir. The waiter retreated. Toast, Nicolte said, holding up his glass with one bony, vein hand now blotched with age, to the successful conclusion of our meeting here tonight. Victor held up his glass. The two clinked. Salute, the big man said. Salute, the Don acknowledged before turning up his glass for a drink. The champagne-colored Porsche carrier slid through traffic with graceful speed as it swung from the Jefferson Street off-ramp of I-5 and headed into downtown Seattle. His driver, Benjamin Big Ben Creed, expertly wheeled the sleek machine into the rear parking lot of Steve's Steakhouse and stepped out onto the darkened lot, nodded to his silent passenger, and headed inside the restaurant. Benjamin was met by the head waiter and led quietly to a rear window seat where the man he'd come to see sat sipping a glass of wine, looking like a corporate lawyer in his dark blue suit, crisp white shirt, and tie. Ben wore black slack shoes and silk shirt. He neared the table where Nicolte and his bodyguard sat, now getting to their feet as he came to the table. Nicolte held out a hand. Benjamin shook it. Both men now seated themselves before the maitre d' reappeared to take their orders. I'll have a glass of Hennessy, Ben said, his smooth dark features almost glowing beneath the soft candlelight of the table, his clear brown eyes lazily moving over his surroundings before coming to rest on the two Italians. The waiter withdrew. Nicolette spoke first. I'm very pleased you could make it. The Don said, I hope that by the end of our talk, you will consider me as a friend as I honestly look to effect a beneficial arrangement for us both. Ben nodded but remained silent, indicating that Nicolte should continue. You have quite the operation here in Seattle, I'm told. Nicolte smiled, his hands brought together beneath his chin. I commend you on your success, and I'm in the unique position to add to that success. Oh, yeah? Ben watched the man intently. Yes, how so? Nicolette grinned. You don't waste words. I like that. Benjamin nodded acceptingly. You have shipments of merchandise moving into the western half of the state, Nicolette said knowingly, and you're doing anywhere from 400 to 600 units per month. I can give you the eastern half of the state as well as Oregon and Idaho. Ben eyed the man quietly as he quickly did the math on the proposal. The numbers were astronomical, but wasn't quite good enough to climb into bed with the Seattle mob, he decided, before his drink arrived and the two men ordered dinner. What you suppose sounds good, Ben said, sitting back in his chair and crossing his legs. What was the cut gonna cost me? It was time for Nicolette to silently consider the other man's questions, which the answer would be the maker or breaker of the deal. Rather than answer, he added bonus. I understand you're also in the gun market. I've got friends in the market at the highest levels, and I see no reason why you shouldn't have an opportunity to benefit from their services. Nicolette finished, sipping his drink and waiting for Ben's response. It was true that he had indeed dabbled with guns recently. He accepted a small shipment a few months prior through his fencing operation and had made a nice profit. But he wasn't looking to deal regularly with them. He already had the DA and FBI to worry about without adding the ATF to the list, Ben thought, sipping his glasses well before repeating his question. Let's say we did business, Ben said thoughtfully. How big a cut are we talking? 60-40, 50-50, 70-30, what? I'd say 50-50 would be justified, Nicolette said. And would this be limited to our joint dealings or my overall operations? The Don cleared his throat softly. This was the sensitive issue, and it had to be handled just so he could blow his chance to bring the man under his influence. The arrival of dinner bought him a few minutes reprieve as a plate of veal cutlets with a side order of pasta was set for him. A large and succulent medium-rare T-bone with a baked potato and a side order of salad was served to Ben. The men dug in quietly, each in his own thought as they ate. Victor sat off to the side sipping a large Coke as he contemplated the progression of the conversation between Nicolette and Ben. The Don was the undisputed lord of the Northwest criminal underworld. He made the laws that men lived and died by. Why should he the pussyfoot with a nigger was beyond Victor's understanding. And the nigger carried himself with the swagger of a chief. And maybe he was chief over his small empire, but the families of Las Cosa Nostra were the elite in the rackets and had muscle to back their position. Victor watched as his boss pushed his plate away, now filled and ready to resume the talk. In answer to your question, the Don said casually as he lit up his customary cigar after dinner and trained his eye on Ben. I don't ask that you pay the standard tribute for operating in what's been our territory for 30 years, but I propose a 50-50 split of any end. All business you deal in the Northwest. I believe my statement is fair, being that my family is prepared to aid and assist you in any way possible. Benjamin forked up the last sliver of beef, chewed thoughtfully for several seconds, swallowed, and said, You must be joking. I can assure you, I'm dead serious. The Don frowned from across the table as he watched the big black use the napkin to wipe his mouth, sip from his glass, and light a cigar of his own before continuing the conversation. I see. Ben grinned. I pay you 50% of every dime I earn in the region. Is that what you're saying? You make it sound like robbery, Nicolette said calmly. No, not robbery, because that would take a lot of muscle. Benjamin sat forward in his seat as he addressed the old mobster. A hell of a lot of muscle, in fact, and I'm not the one to allow myself to be robbed, he said, pausing to blow smoke rings into Victor's face, who now sat scowling. But I'll tell you what, Mr. Nicolette, Ben said, stubbing his cigar out of Nicolette's plate, you find yourself another mark and I'm going to forget we had this conversation. And he pointed one large dark finger at Victor. You seem to be stinged by my presence. We have a fucking problem. Victor remained quiet, but clearly angered by the blatant show of disrespect to his boss. Well, Ben sighed before getting to his feet. Thanks for the meal, he winked, turned and headed for the door. Don Nicolette sat too stunned to feel any immediate anger as he watched the tall, gracefully moving big man exit the restaurant out into the night. The black son of a bitch had virtually spat in his face. The cocksucker had openly challenged his authority, his muscle. The Don fumed, now get the check. The Don spat, getting to his feet and heading towards the door. Victor slid a $100 bill onto the table and quickly stepped past his boss out into the warm breeze of the night, his Smith & Wesson hanging beneath his left arm in a holster as he opened the rear door for his Don, before going around to the driver's side and sliding behind the wheel. Victor hoped he'd be part of a hit crew given the job of whacking the big nigger, he thought, putting the key into the ignition and turning it. The concussive shock wave from a wad of C4 plastic explosives blew out all of the windows of Steve's Steakhouse as the blast lifted the big sedan 3 feet into the air, peeling back its roof like a sardine can, blowing off 2 doors, and cutting the car in half, leaving 2 bright flaming fireballs. The restaurant cleared in seconds as people poured out fearing a terrorist attack. A few stood bleeding with lacerations to their face and hands from the flying glass by the huge windows. No one paid any attention to the lowing of the champagne-colored Porsche or the 2 black men grinning inside as they rolled past the chaotic scene. The Lost Black Files, the hidden legend of Yasmite Black Sam. Volume I. Olivia had enough, she told herself while holding an ice pack to her mother's temple where her father, Edward Carter, had struck her with a closed fist before turning his drunken fury on Olivia and her 6 siblings. She'd grown used to the weekly beatings, but this one was the worst, with her youngest sister Colleen suffering a broken arm, her little brother, David, a broken jaw, and herself with a blackened eye. Her mother, William, may have suffered the worst. One eye as red as a fire engine from a busted capillary, 2 teeth knocked out, and a suspected broken collarbone on top of forced sexual intercourse her ill-tempered, alcoholic husband had inflicted on her. She sat shaking in shock and fear as Olivia tended her. Olivia had never hated the man that was her father more than she had now as she tried soothing her mother with empty words of promise that no more will any of them be battered or hurt. She knew one promise that held merit, and that was she would leave home to make something noteworthy of herself, so that she could return and take her mother and siblings away from the 3-bedroom shack they shared in rural Alabama. Her father had once been a good man, a dependable man, until he lost his job at the local mill and took to drinking full-time. Now he worked as ranch hand at a nearby horse ranch when he wasn't beating his family or passed out drunk on the torn and musty old living room sofa. Olivia knew she had to leave, and she would this day. She decided, deep in thought, if she stayed, she would kill the man that had helped give her life, their life. So it was the night of 1998 that a young, beautiful, 17-year-old virgin, an Alabama native, would leave for school and not return for quite some time. The small Greyhound bus depot was really no more than a bus stop with a small service desk, Olivia saw as she paid for her ticket. "What would you like a ticket to?" the elderly white ticket clerk asked, watching the girl being dropped dead gorgeous with her huge oval shape, light green eyes, high cheekbones, full lips, and an hourglass figure looked to be no older than 14. The clerk mused. 7. Olivia studied the map behind the clerk taped to the wall, letting her eyes roam for several seconds before deciding on Seattle, Washington. "Seattle, please," she said with an uneasy smile. She hadn't even boarded the bus and she was already homesick. "That'll be $99 one way," the clerk said. $125 round trip. One way. She sighed, handing over the money and realizing that she only had $61 to live on between here and Seattle, and she'd be facing a strange and alien environment with no prior experience. She took her ticket and wandered outside into the warm and humid sunshine. She removed the Twix candy bar that she had bought from the station's vending machine and slowly began eating it, hoping it could be enough to hold her hunger for the next 8 hours. 2 hours later, she boarded a bus for an adventure that would almost take her life. The sun set high in the powdery blue skies as Benjamin Creed rolled out of the large 4-posters and wandered onto the bedroom balcony of his 2-bedroom condominium off of Lake Washington. He eyed the traffic moving along the 520 bridge, the sun glinting off the windshield. He'd awakened with 2 beautiful, voluptuous blondes in his bed. At the age of 56 years old, he was as sexually active as a man half his age and possessed a young energy. He stood now at the very apex of his life and its success. He owned a 48-foot yacht, 2 homes well over $1 million each, the condo he now stood in, as well as another in Miami's South Beach neighborhood. He had several expensive sports cars and luxury sedans as he dated the most beautiful woman in the world. He loved his life. he thought as he returned to his bedroom to wake the two gorgeous Swedes. But he hadn't always thought as growing up in Chicago's South Side during the 60s. Crime, poverty, and homicides, which had been the norm, and not many families had it as bad as the Creeds in the single-parent home. A mother who was a part-time prostitute, full-time heroin addict, a non-existent father. Robbery, drugs, rapes, and murders were an everyday thing in his young life. So by the age of 15, he was a hard-boiled criminal. It was how he survived after his older brother had his brains blew out and scattered all over Racine Avenue the year before. He'd become the man of the house, caring for his little sister and paying the rent. He'd entered the streets eyes wide open and guns blazing. Money, knack, and murder became his creed, and it remained until this very day. Then, one of the women called from the bath area. "Would you like to join us?" "No," he grinned. "You to go on and I'll make us breakfast." He turned and headed for the kitchen. He'd made a few strategic moves lately that seemed to be paying off. Taking out Vincent Nicolette had more than ruffled a few feathers, but it wasn't anything he actively worried about. He'd gotten the green light from Chicago, which whom he had been doing substantial business with over the years after being given the 24th Ward on the South Side once the neighborhoods went black. He set about whipping up beef omelets, toast, raisin bagels, hash browns, and freshly squeezed OJ. The women joined him in half an hour later, as they sat and enjoyed their meal over small talk and the latest word on the streets. "So," Benjamin smiled, "what have you guys been hearing about me?" "That you're hung like a horse." The woman giggled girlishly. "That's all," he chuckled. "And at one point you ran the mob in Seattle." The younger of the two blondes answered casually. Ben simply nodded. An hour later, he stood alone in the large condo studying his face in the bathroom mirror. His dark complexion, dark brown eyes, spreading nose, and low-cut fade. He cranked up his treadmill and began his 6-mile daily run while letting his mind roam free. By taking out Nicolette, he put himself in bed with the Chicago outfit. But Mario Ferrero, the active boss of the Chicago mob, was softened. This could be lead in a bad direction. In any case, Mario won't be boss that long due to the unrest in the ranks. His captains were split in the backing of the Ferrero faction. Albert Bocastro would be a problem should he become boss, and his name was in the hat along with Michael Augustine and Paul Di Stefano. Michael would be a more favorable pick. Then Mo. Michael grew up with blacks and loved black women almost as much as he did hip-hop. The young captain would bring an updated sense of leadership to the Chicago family instead of the outdated whims of old men. About 30 minutes later, Ben stepped from the tread machine dripping and perpetrated as he headed to the shower, turning it on cold. The freezing beads of water stole his breath away for the first few seconds as he began to lather himself. The day looked to be a beautiful one. He thought that maybe he could catch a show at the local cinema. Ben loved going to the movies and the cinema atmosphere. He even had one built in his home. After 20 minutes, he stepped from the shower and padded nakedly for his bedroom, where he threw on a baby blue and white Villa sweatsuit with matching Jordan tennis, a large gold rope with a diamond-encrusted medallion, a heavy gold Rolex watch, and large diamond earrings, spraying on Gucci cologne while checking his image in his floor-to-ceiling mirror within his bedroom. He headed out to his garage and climbed behind the wheel of the 8 burgundy Bentley, before turning the ignition over and letting the luxury sedan idle as he dialed up his protege. "Hello," a man answered. "Spud," Benjamin called, dropping the car in reverse and backing out into early morning sunshine traffic and lowering the convertible top. "Big Ben," the man said, sounding genuinely pleased to hear from the big man. "How've you been?" "Chillin', baby boy." Ben chuckled. "I figured we could go for a couple of drinks and catch a new release." "I'm down with it. I shoot through in about 30 minutes. I'm at Rainier Beach," Spud said excitedly. "I've been hooping, but come swoop a nigga up. See you in 30. Ben smiled before hanging up. Spud, Rico Graves, was a bright kid as an exceptional athlete. He'd met Chance one afternoon a year before when Ben had come down to the Rainier Beach gym for a pickup game and almost got himself robbed at gunpoint by a light-skinned redhead young man he'd never seen before. The pudgy kid had materialized out of nowhere in the small school parking lot to level a 9mm Berettas in his face, demanding his jewelry and wallet. Rocco had shot well together on the court. It was Rocco who had defused the situation, possibly saving Ben's life. But definitely saving the life would be Robert. To show his appreciation, Ben had taken Rico out to lunch where the two had talked and ate. Ben was surprised that not one schools had offered the kid a scholarship to play university. Ben found that the young man was not only a hell of a ball player but smart as they come as well. Spud reminded him a lot of himself when he was that age. Ben quickly saw the possibilities and raw potential in the kid, and has secured the kid's tuition for the first 4 years of college from his own pocket. The kid could go all the way, Ben had thought, and if so, it represented a unique opportunity to Ben in the future. He turned the $18,000 car stereo up as he sped across the 520 to meet with his investment. Olivia had been in Seattle 3 months, living and hustling in the streets. She'd come close to being raped several times, shot at twice, beat up once, and jailed 3 times for trespassing in some place or another. All she could really be thankful for is that it was summer in Seattle, but you couldn't notice by all of the rain that fell over the city. She hustled up enough to pay for a hotel a week in advance, and she also had saved a couple $100 from dealing small amounts of crack in Seattle's downtown area. She never really considered prostitution an option. She'd rather starve to death. But being above average in her IQ, she quickly set her mind to the problem of homelessness and came up with its answer. She'd also become adept to pickpocketing, shortchanging, and shortcon. She'd met others who were runaways from home, but never saw herself in that light, even though it was true that she left without telling a soul. Her plans was to return someday and lift her family from the grasp of poverty and abuse. One girl she befriended was a young woman named Trina, who was a year younger but very streetwise. It was Trina who had taught her the drug trade. The rest she learned through trial and error. The two became fast friends and a regular fixture on the downtown scene. At 5:30 a.m., neither had been asleep since the prior morning, electing to pull an all-nighter selling crack. Since it was the 3rd of the month and most addicts would be receiving a county check and food stamps. "You want some more coffee?" Trina, a dark-skinned, gangly young woman, asked. "I'm going to get some cocoa." "Yeah," Olivia said, partially distracted as she was wrangling with a male addict over the size of her rocks or lack thereof. "I'll take mine black. No sugar." "Okay," Trina said, heading into the McDonald's across the street from Westlake Mall, parting the sea of young drug dealers who sold everything from crack to embalming fluid. "Can I get 2 for the 20? An older addict in a tattered green military surplus jacket asked, slipping up next to Olivia. "This is my last," he added. "Here," she said, her hand snaking up into her bra, removing a small baggie of crack as she quickly opened it up, shook out 2 rocks and handed them to the fiend. "Good-looking little mama." The addict grinned, placing the rocks into his pocket and turning to stroll away without paying the $20. "Hold up, dude," Olivia called, taking him by his coat sleeve and turning his back to face her. "You be giving me my money or giving back the dope. I ain't got shit for you, bitch." He spat before shoving her down onto the ground and turning once more to walk off before he found her back on her feet and in his face. "Pay me or pay Harborview Hospital a visit," Olivia hissed, coughing into her hand and getting in his face. "Bitch," he began before she sliced him from eyebrow to navel with a razor blade she kept in her mouth and surreptitiously spat into her hand. Before the man could understand that he was being cut, his brow fell open to the bone and his scream was so chillingly woeful it froze others that were busy selling or smoking crack. The man stumbled back away from his beautiful attacker as large droplets of blood splattered all over his tennis and soaked his soiled jeans. But still he could not move as she put her whole 122 pounds on his foot and now held the blade poised to strike again. "Give me my fucking money," she whispered calmly, "or give me my dough." The addict readily gave her the $20 he had in his jeans pocket that was now blood red around the bill's edges. Olivia accepted the money and now demanded the crack back that she'd given him as a large crowd had gathered and watched in awed silence. The man quickly gave her back the 2 rocks as he moaned in pain. She finally stepped off of his feet and let him flee as Trina approached timidly, not sure if it was safe to approach the other woman or not as the crowd looked after the fleeing victim. "You okay?" Trina asked hesitantly, offering a medium-sized cup of cocoa to her. "I'm fine, girl." Olivia smiled, accepting the steaming cup and sipping gingerly before speaking again. Dude tried to rob me. Yeah, he got the worst of it. I see. Let's head to the square. Olivia sighed tiredly. He might call the cops. Let's go, Trina said before flagging down a taxi and quickly climbing into the rear next to her. Ollie, Trina said in a whisper. Yeah, were you trying to kill him? No, Olivia said, sitting back into the seat with her eyes closed. Did it seem like that? Yeah. 13. You okay with what happened? Of course. I hope so. Olivia opened her eyes and leaned forward before turning to Trine. It's just for them out here, girl, and if you let them have an inch, they'll want a mile, and before you know it, you'll be suffering out here hand to mouth, or worse. I've been there and I ain't going back. I intend to make it out of these streets even if I have to hurt many more guys like that. I hear you, girl. I'm almost out of cream. Olivia yawned as the cab speeded down 3rd Avenue. Call your boy up and tell him I want a half ounce. Yep, Trina said, removing her cell phone and calling her dealer as the sun peeked over the skyscrapers, flooding the cab with golden bars of sunlight. The Lost Black Files, the hidden legend of Yasmite Black Sam. Volume I. The Street of Dreams was a 48-footer with all of the amenities of a floating penthouse, and by far the largest yacht in the Ballard Marina. Rico thought, admiring her as he came up the double flight deck and seated himself at the small bench seat and dealt out a hand of cards across the teakwood table to his friend and mentor Benjamin Creed. So, Ben said, it's off to college in a few weeks. Man, I can't wait, Rocco grinned. You know what your major will be? Bitches and liquor. The youngster laughed boisterously. I'm serious, Spud. I know, the kid said, choking off his laughter to now consider the old man, but I haven't really planned on staying for the full 4 years. I figured to be in the NBA, but Ben had been in favor of him getting a real education nonetheless, and now looked on with displeasure as he set his cards aside. Tell me why the rush to the league? Ben asked. Why not? I just think you're selling yourself short if you don't come out with a degree. I need a degree to get a decent paying job, the kid said, but the NBA is one of the highest paying jobs in the world. I could always get a degree later if I wanted to. The guy had a point. Ben shrugged grudgingly as he picked up his cards and pulled one from the deck before discarding another from his hand. Kids today wanted it all overnight, he thought, but he couldn't blame the young man for going after the money. Not really, he decided as he watched him toss out a card and draw one from the deck. Wasn't money what it was about in the end? Hadn't money been his chief pursuit for the last 3 decades? Of course it was, he admitted to himself silently, and thought as he picked up a pair of 7s from the table. Maybe he should allow the young man room to figure a few things out for himself. He'd come out all right at 56 with no one to mentor nor counsel him, hadn't he? He looked around the stately Street of Dreams and the large marina that harbored her. He studied the cluster-faced Rolex and thought about his 8-bedroom estate in Texas, the collection of cars and other toys he bought. Yes, he'd come out all right, and perhaps the kid would too, he concluded before refocusing on the game at hand. Where's that young dime piece I met last week? The young man grinned, his smooth brown complexion glowing with the energies of youth. The siesta? Ben asked, stacking up 10s on the table before taking them up with the 10 of diamond. No, she was French, Spud said. The tall, model broad. Oh, Bernice. Ben laughed. Somewhere in the Virgin Islands shooting for this year's swimsuit issue, I suppose. What do you be telling these bras? What they want to hear. Ben wait. Come on, man. Spud urged, put me up on game. You're already on the game. Ben signaled a passing hand and ordered up a pitcher of lemonade before turning back to address the young man further. If you figure out what they want, then you can perform miracles, young Spud. The two played several hands of casino and talked about everything from women to basketball while drinking ice-cold lemonade in the sun. The 3 men hit Crusette Park behind an abandoned industrial warehouse in Ballard while their couple, Leo DeBase, spoke in hushed tones to someone on his cell phone before finally hanging up, pulling the slide on his block 17 and instructing his driver to head for the location he'd given earlier. The killing of Vincent Nicolette would not go unchecked, Leo thought, pleased with getting the green light on the filthy nigger. This day had been long in coming. Months had passed, but he would make the man beg him for death before he was finished with him, Leo vowed quietly as the black Lincoln sped on towards their target. Olivia sat at the table of her small motel room counting crumpled bills, straightening them out in a semblance of sequence as Trina lay sleeping across the single bed. She managed to save close to $2,000 so far, and briefly considered moving into a more stable living arrangement, renting an apartment or room at a local boarding house, before thinking better of it and instead of opting to continue saving money she earned. She quickly banded together the $2,000 stacks, hid them deep beneath the threadbare carpet, and headed to the kitchenette where she set out a small mayo jar, filled with water, and sat it before the microwave. She reached inside her jean pocket and removed 2 ounces of fine white powder cocaine, quickly emptying it onto a saucer and going over it with a razor blade. She placed the jar of water into the microwave and brought it to a boil, before removing it, placing the powder into the jar and placing the jar back into the microwave. "How long have you been up?" Trina asked, stifling a yawn as she padded into the small kitchen, her hair standing all over her head as she stretched sleepily. "I've been up since 7 o'clock. She giggled, taking in the gracefully thin girl and her rumpled appearance slyly. "Thought I'd cook up some cream while you were asleep." "You could have woke me up," Trina said. "I would have done it for you. I think I got the hang of it now," Olivia said, taking up a dish towel, removing the scalding jar from the microwave and pouring 2 spoons of baking soda into the jar before adding cold water to the mix. She rotated the jar while continuously applying cold water to it. Now, as the large white mass of rock cocaine now clanged musically against the glass, Olivia grinned. "Girl, you getting good." Trina congratulated her as she eyed the large cookie of crack now resting in the palm of Olivia's hand. "I'm about to hit the tea in an hour," Olivia said, setting the cookie on a large plate and seating herself Indian style on the unmade bed. "You coming?" she asked Trina, bringing the razor edge down on the cookie and cracking it into several smaller chunks, then cutting them into individual groups of smaller rocks. "Let me get showered real quick," Trina said, sauntering off for the shower, "and I'll be ready to go." Olivia expertly cut chunks into a large pile of rocks before placing it all into a large brown pill bottle and sticking the bottle into her coat pocket. An hour and a half later, the 2 women were stepping out of a yellow cab onto the corner of 3rd and Yester in downtown Seattle, where they were immediately swarmed by a group of crack addicts wielding fists full of bills. "I'm gonna meet back with you in an hour," Trina said, slipping off through the crowd while Olivia sold over half her drugs in under an hour. "Ollie, girl," a sickly, thin, and grossly pock-marked complexion prostitute named hoarsely, "can I spend $200 with you?" she asked as she sashayed up next to where Olivia now sat on the back of a park bench. "Yeah, Red," Olivia said, now leaning slightly away from the crust-like scabs peppering the woman's legs all the way up to her exposed scalp, and the horrid-smelling body odor wafting through clothes that almost became one with her body. "You gotta hook me up, girlfriend," the woman croaked while swaying back and forth on her feet, her body pushed weeks past proper nutrition and needed sleep as she eyed the handful of rocks Olivia held out to her, her eyes bloodshot but attended with excitement. "Is that all you gon' give me?" "I'm trying to come up, Ollie," she said, angling for a better deal. "Here, Red," Olivia spat irritably, eyeing the crackhead before adding 2 more rocks to the handful she held out. "You can't get an ounce for $200, Red." The crackhead quickly took the rocks from her hand and gave over the $200 before turning on her heels and scurrying off through the crowd out of sight. Olivia checked her stash of drugs and realized she was almost out once she called up her dealer for more. 2 hours later, she dealt with her dealer, bought 2 more ounces, and found her supply almost depleted before deciding to call her supplier once more. She got through to him on the first ring and now sat to await his arrival. "Can I get a $50, Ollie?" a tall, handsome addict asked, stopping before her as she sat on the bench. "What's up, Miles?" Olivia smiled, quickly reaching into her stash and handing the guy 5 rocks. "Thanks, Ollie," he said, accepting the dope and handing over $50. Olivia took the 50 and turned away at the sound of the now rumbling bass that resonated from a beautiful candy blue classic Chevy lowrider that came down Yesler and swung next to the curb on 3rd, its rear end scraping the street as the front end sat some 5 feet above its small golden wire wheels. "Ollie, girl," Blaze, her dealer, called to her from the front passenger seat. Olivia hopped down from her perch on the bench, making her way to the car, her full hips swaying naturally seductively in her black-skin tight jeans, half shirt, and small white Jordan tennis. "Hey, Blaze," she said, smiling as she stepped next to the car. "You got what I called you about." "You already know." He grinned. "Hop in so we can hit a few corners. It's hot in the tea." Olivia studied the two men sitting in back as they passed a fifth of tequila around amidst a cloud of marijuana smoke now billowing out through the open window. She wasn't really comfortable riding with Blaze and his group of friends, but decided she needed the 2 ounces he brought for her, so she slid into the backseat passenger side. The Chevy sprang up off of all 4 tires to now sit 3 feet high into the air as its tires screeched, laying down smoking tracks before merging with the traffic. "Here you go, homegirl," one of the men in the back said, passing her the open bottle of liquor. "I'm cool," she smiled. "What's up with my package, Blaze?" She turned her attention on the front passenger. "I got you, girl," he said calmingly. "Pioneer Square's hot." Olivia gestured as they pulled up to a light. "Ain't that nigga that shot at Bo Money the driver?" the short, chubby man asked excitedly. "Sure the fuck is," Blaze affirmed. "Pass me the heat," he called urgently over the front seat to the men in back, who quickly threw back a blue blanket that covered ammunition, a cache of deadly-looking assault rifles, an MP5, and several other pistols that lay next to the larger guns. "Forget the package," Olivia sighed disappointedly as she eyed the guns. "Drop me off on the next corner. I'm not with being in the middle of a shootout." Bitch," the driver spat heatedly. "Why the fuck did you get your punk ass in the car in the first place?" "Man, fuck you," she replied. "Let me out, Blaze." "Can't do that right now, lil' mama," he said, chuckling. "I ain't come all the way to ride back with dope on me. So you bought what I brought." Olivia quietly considered the turn of events while forcing herself to stay calm. Blaze wanted the $1,000 for the package, so it was best that she completed their transaction and then work on getting herself out of the car. "All right," she said, "give me the shit." 20. Blaze moved around in the front seat and finally handed over the 2 ounces he brought for her as they followed the other car into the Central District. Olivia gave Blaze the $1,000 before asking to be let out of the car. "Bitch, you need to," the driver began before being openly checked by the beautiful young woman. "You must have a problem getting fucked regularly," Olivia snapped icily, "because you think you see a bitch back here instead of a woman. You have a real big fucking mouth, man. It's probably bigger than your dick." The brakes were thrown so suddenly that everyone was shot forward out of their seats as the driver fought the other man trying to climb over the seat and get his hands on her. The struggle didn't cease until the heavy metallic clink of a bow being pulled got their attention. Olivia held the MP5 submachine gun in both hands, pointed at the group of men with a deadly gleam in her eyes. "I'm getting out of this car," she said, opening the passenger door of the coupe and forcing Blaze's seat forward, jamming him up against the dashboard as she quickly stepped out into the street. "I'll hold onto this until later," she said, waving the gun and ignoring honking traffic. "And the next time you think you see a bitch, check and be sure it's not your mama, punk." She slammed the passenger's door, tucked the gun behind her back, and quickly disappeared down a side alley. "Shoot for the ball," Ben called across the Ballard Park basketball court as Spud dribbled the ball lazily between his legs. Ben has the ball, shoots, and misses. Spud's ball as he steps to the top of the key and brings the ball into play. He comes at Ben Crouch with a steady dribble into play. He comes at Ben Crouch with a steady dribble between his legs before feigning to his right, which gets Ben out of position before he crosses the ball over to his left and blows by Ben for an easy layup, scoring the game's first points. "Not bad," Ben grins, checking the ball at the top of the key to Spud, who immediately takes it and launches a 19-foot jumper swish through the net. Ben nods, retrieving the ball, and checks it at the top of the key to Spud, but this time keeping close to the young man. "Check," Ben calls. "Check." Spud grins, accepting the ball and dribbling to his right before crossing Ben over, taking a hot step backwards and popping off a 22-foot jumper that snaps cleanly through the net. 3-0. Spud said, heading back to the top of the key as Benjamin brought the ball up the court and passed it for a check. "Check ball." Ben smiled. "Check," Spud said with a smile and returned before bringing the ball back inbound, dribbling easily around his back as he backs away from the advancing Ben. He attempts a fancy crossover, but Ben anticipated it and ripped the ball cleanly from the young man's hands. "You're gonna have to do better than that," Ben smiled before backing the smaller man down, spinning quickly to his feet and throwing down a two-handed jam. 3-1. Ben calls. 3-1. Spud says grudgingly as the men go on to play several games with Spud winning all but one. An hour and 20 minutes later, both had showered and dressed before strolling the parking lot headed for the car as a black Lincoln pulled into the lot from the opposite end, moving at funeral progression speed. Ben's white Escalade. What's this? Spud says in alarm as he nudges Benjamin, bringing his attention to the group of hard-working men stepping from the Lincoln with some pistol-grip AKs and shotguns. Hit! Ben yelled, pushing Spud to the ground seconds before the thunderous clatter of the AK-47s opening up. The rounds cut through butter before Ben retreated on hands and knees now, pulling Spud behind him as he crept through the rows of parked cars. Wow. Keeping low and out of sight of the shooters who were laying down an overwhelming barrage of fire on the area they'd been standing seconds earlier. Some unlucky bystander wandered out on the scene seconds later to be cut down by the booming sounds of the Mossberg, his chest exploding as one of the double-AUG rounds hit him dead on and lifted his body up over the front end of a small Mazda while Ben and Spud made their way out of the killing zone. Several seconds later, the big Lincoln screeched from the parking lot sideways as the crowd begins to gather. You okay? Ben asked the kid, helping him up to his feet and noticing a trace of blood on the shoulder of his shirt. You're bleeding. Yeah, Spud said shakily, looking around the lot at the gathering faces before his eyes stopped on the sprawled body not 10 yards away from them. The dark pool of blood had begun spreading beneath the body and widening as they watched. That's no good, Ben said, taking him away from the grisly scene and setting him down on the grass lining the park's entrance. Man, Spud said, dazed. What was that about? I don't know, but I plan to find out, Ben vowed, removing the boy's shirt and examining the wound that now bled freely. Looks like you caught a few pellets from the shotguns, maybe. I never felt anything, Spud said wearily. You'll be all right, he said. Come on. Let's call my people before the police get here and keep us for questioning. Spud got to his feet as Ben spoke on the phone, and the two men headed out of the park to a nearby restaurant, where Spud went into the restroom and examined his shoulder in the mirror before coming out to join Ben in a booth seat. My people will be here shortly, Ben said, smiling at the young man. You sure you all right? I'm fine, bro. That's what I like to hear. I'm thirsty. Coming up, Ben said, signaling a waitress and ordering a round of drinks. I'm gonna be in Chicago for a few months, he said after the waitress left, but you'll be able to reach me night or day. When are you leaving? Spud asked, surprised. Come on, man, you're off to Arizona State soon anyway, Ben reminded. Couple of days. Take me with you, bro. Can't right now. You can visit on spring break. Their drinks arrived and each sipped quietly at their glasses before resuming their conversation. Does your leaving have anything to do with today? Spud asked, sipping his brandy. No, he said, truthful. I have business out there that needs tending. Oh, whatever happened today didn't go as planned, so I doubt they'll lay off now. Man, they meant business. Spud sighed now, feeling the liquor warm his belly and relax the tension in his back. Now it's my turn. Ingrained. I thought you didn't know who it was. I don't, but I have a good idea. Are they gangsters? You can call them that. What are you gonna do now? The kid asked somberly. Enjoy my drink in your company, he said before taking a long swallow from his glass. He knew it was the Italians who sent the crew to kill him. He suspected that they might try something a lot sooner than today. Vincent Nicolette was killed 6 months earlier, so he'd expect them to try to hit him long before now. Who was in charge of the Seattle family now? He pondered quietly. It could only be one of three guys, Pasquale and Felix, Ralph Costello, or Frankie Frybottom. All were capable and all would look to avenge the Don, if for no more than to maintain respect for their family. All three would possibly have to go, he thought. Whatever. Their time was up, and this time he planned to pull the family up by his roots. Benjamin Creed was nobody's fool. He knew what hitting the Seattle faction could trigger, but he also knew that Chicago and possibly New York wouldn't interfere in an all-out war, and if they were to intercede, it would be carried out in his favor. So, the Seattle outfit wanted to play rough now. They would regret their attempt by the time this war was over, he promised himself. I'm sorry about what happened, he said quietly. I would never knowingly put your life or your health at risk. I'm a big boy. Spud smiled. Shit happens. Yeah, all the time. Thanks, Rico, he sighed, visibly relieved. No problem, bro. The two finished their second round of drinks as the four-car procession swung into the restaurant's parking lot and a group of large men stepped from the cars to make their way silently inside. Frankie Frabata was furious with the news that Benjamin Creed was very much still alive and apparently planning to go to war over the botched attempt that was made on his life. What the hell is the wrong with you? Frank asked, glaring at Leo. Bias and his crew. You fucking come in here with shit to show for yourself after you were told how sensitive shit was. We may have to go to the mattresses over your fuck up, Leo, and risk the lives of some very irreplaceable guys. Leo listened quietly when what he really felt like doing was grabbing the guide and grabbing the son of a bitch by the collar and telling him exactly what it was that he, Leo Bias, thought about him being made boss of the family, but he refrained from doing such. Leo could think of at least 10 other guys who were better suited for leadership than this midget asshole who was now screaming in his face. You take your crew, a full crew, and finish what you started. Don Frabata threatened, and I don't want any more excuses. You hear me? Sure, Frankie, Leo said meekly. Now get out of here. Leo left the office of Sam's Produce Company in Renton and slowly made his way to the rear exit. His crew was leaning on the late model Cadillac, smoking cigarettes and horse playing. Cut the shit, he growled sourly as he stepped out beneath the overcast skies. Frankie wants the nigga in a box. How are we supposed to do that when he has more fucking security than the president now? Patrick Ricker, a thin, baby-faced Sicilian, spoke. You do what you're freaking told, Pat. Leo almost screamed in frustration. Come on, the rest of you. Quit dicking around. He headed around to the passenger seat as his men all piled in behind him without further comment. Frankie had spoken his will, and there was no getting around that will, Leo thought, as the driver slid behind the wheel of the big SUV and backed out before turning and pointing his nose towards the street. You have any idea how to get this guy? The driver, Victor Maraglia, asked his capo quietly. It's not going to be an easy thing now, Leo sighed disgustedly. We'll be lucky if we even get a second chance after we missed already. They would have to come up with an answer to their problem before long, Leo thought, sour. The bastard sure wasn't gonna make himself an easy target now that he knew the heat was on his ass. Pat had only spoken what was on each of their mind, Leo mulled. Only now they didn't have much time to solve the problem before Frankie maybe had him whacked for lack of performance. The little prick wasn't wrapped too tight to begin with, Leo mused, and it wouldn't take that much time to set him off. Leo didn't fear being hit. This was part of their reality, but to be whacked because you couldn't get the job done was dishonorable, and he'd choose death over dishonor. He stood quietly as he set his thoughts now on how to get the task completed. The Lost Black Files, The Hidden Legend of Yasmai Black Sam. Volume I. Olivia steered the old Cutlass Supreme onto Rainier Avenue while Trina babbled on incessantly at her side. The two friends had sought a night away from normal activities and had already visited several clubs where they shared drinks and danced to the music being played on several occasions. Have you ever been to the Hook Line? Trina asked as they turned off Rainier onto MLK South and blended into Friday night traffic. Not inside, Olivia admitted, but I always wanted to check it out, you know, and see what the atmosphere was like. In the last 2 months, Olivia had managed to save just under $10,000 and buy the early model old schools they were driving in. While Trina seemed to be content to hustle day by day with no long-term plans, Olivia was the very opposite. She planned to save up $20,000 and pay her way through a nursing course the local community college offered and lease her own place so that she could have her mother and siblings move up with her in Seattle. Trina was far less motivated but was a caring person, and Olivia valued her friendship. The girls had been through a lot together through the past few months and now seemed to have come through the worst of their trials. They lived in a nice hotel now and could afford better meals and buy nicer clothes to wear out as they did this night. Olivia wore a nice Armani skirt set with open-toed sandals. Trina wore designer jeans, blouse, and heels. Both had their hair and nails done earlier in the day and now looked to enjoy the remainder of their evening out. They pulled into the low-lit parking lot of the nightclub, parked, and made their way inside. The club was packed with black and brown faces out on the dance floor, and at the bar the girls saw while making their way to an empty table. It's loud, Olivia said, taking in the surroundings. It's smaller than the other clubs, Trina replied, almost yelling to be heard. 28. Let's order a round of drinks, she added, turning towards the bar and signaling the bartender. Olivia settled down at the table and had a moment to think before a good-looking young man offered to buy her a drink. The guy had a pretty nice-looking package with his clear brown eyes, nice evenly spaced white teeth, smooth brown complexion, and dimpled chin. He introduced himself as Rico, explaining that his kids called him Spud. Nice to meet you, Rico. Olivia